I think that finally, and I will mention this in 1 minute, and we can perhaps discuss it in the question and answer, the key to the problem is a regional one, and it involves contact among the states of the region. The 5 permanent members of the Security Council are obviously interested, but I am talking about particularly China, Russia, and Iran that need to be invited into and India that need to be invited into that mix. The president's policy mentions the formation of a contact group, and as we know, our government is taking the lead in convening just such a conference. There are common interests that I hope in time can affect the thinking of the regional powers, most notably that of India, in its dealings with Pakistan and with the region generally as the regional superpower. And I believe that there is some ground to think that over time there can be success. It must be an international effort, and it shows every sign of being that. Thank you very much.
Today at the City Club, we have been listening to Ambassador Charles F. Dunbar, Professor of International Relations at Boston University. We will return to our speaker in just a moment for our traditional City Club questions and answers. We encourage you to formulate questions now, and we remind you that questions should, if possible, be brief and to the point. We welcome all of you here today, and to those listening on WCPN 90.3 FM, WCLV, WTAM, or one of the many radio stations across the country in our radio network, including station KCAW in Sitka, Alaska, where the dedicated staff of Fortress of the Bear, the nonprofit bear rescue shelter, is preparing for the shift to summer hours on May 1. Radio broadcasts of the City Club are made possible through the generous support of Case Western Reserve University. Our television broadcast partners are WVIZ, PBS, IdeaStream, and Time Warner Cable. Television broadcasts are supported by National City, now part of PNC, and Cleveland State University. Closed captioning is supported by Nordson Corporation. Our live webcasts are supported by the University of Akron. Today, as Charlie was so gracious to mention, is the inaugural Mike Michelson Memorial Program at the City Club of Cleveland. Mike was a very active member of the Special Programs Committee of the club. He was a passionate advocate who enjoyed good discussion and debate. It is fair to say that he was innately suspicious of conventional wisdom and regarded that all ideas be tested and proven. There were very few sacred cows in Mike's pasture. His lifelong devotion to free and open inquiry corresponded closely with the ideals of the City Club itself. Joining us today are more than 24 members of Mike's family, his friends, clients, and colleagues, including some of the basketball players, including Mike's wife, Susan, and 3 daughters. Will all those who are here today for this inauguration please stand and be recognized. Now we would like to return to our speaker for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding the microphones today are City Club Communications and Outreach Coordinator Deborah Augusti and Programs Manager Carrie Miller, respectively this way. Ambassador?
Charlie, nice to have you back in Cleveland, and also for you to share this wisdom and help us try to sort out what is going on in that part of the world, if anybody can. I'd like to ask you what role religion, which we already know is causing tremendous problems, and how we sort of stepped behind and just accepted the fact that in Pakistan, up in the Swat Valley, they were going to allow Sharia law.
I believe, no, I thought you were Hope Edelstein, but you're not. Of course, how are you? Excuse me for not recognizing you. That is an excellent question, and one which I will not begin to try to answer here because it is a long subject. I want to say that I'm sorry, I'll be a little bit controversial here in the spirit of Mike Michelson, that Sharia law is something that is one of the great stereotypes that the United States, that people in the West, rather, equate with a country or a society being cast into outer darkness. And I'm glad to see you nod, because I energetically disagree with that point. I say it's very easy to understand why we think that, because we hear of the imposition of Sharia law in Swat, and what we find are Taliban flailing a young woman. I'm not sure if head chopping has continued, and let's not be in the United States quite as high and mighty as we might be on the question of head chopping, and just put that one out in passing as well, take it for what it's worth, and but that there are many ways. First of all, Sharia law is a very difficult subject to get your mind around. What is clear is that it is governing by a set of principles, and when we speak of governing by a set of principles, we think immediately of the so-called hudud punishments, in which hands are chopped off, people are stoned to death for rape. We do not look beyond the centuries of jurisprudence that have developed around particular principles, and the fact that properly interpreted, and I know that there are lawyers in this room who have done some creative interpretation in their time. I suspect I would think he might have been doing that at one time or another. There are similar people in the East, in the Muslim world, who have done the same thing, and the penalty of stoning someone to death for adultery famously is made difficult to enforce because of the need for there to be 4 witnesses to the act, and properly handled, that means that people are unlikely to be stoned to death for adultery. Now, people like the Taliban are very happy to stone people to death for adultery and do so regularly, but they do not follow the full jurisprudence. It is a question of who is interpreting the law and what sources of interpretation are used. We can see countries around the world, Turkey and Indonesia being good and Malaysia being good examples in which religious law plays a role, and religious parties are running the country as we speak. Turkey is the particular example. Very controversial, very much contested, but nonetheless, the party that seems for most Turks has been set back in recent elections, and that's a good thing. That's how democracy is supposed to work, and the military is not stepping in to set things right. My very long-winded diplomat's academic blend of diplomacy and academic long-windedness is a tough one, is to come to the point and say the Taliban and Sharia law really have very little to do with one another, except that the Taliban proclaim that they are enforcing Sharia law.